The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. It's better to get lost in the passion than to lose the passion. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. Once you label me, you negate me. Leap of faith. Yes, but only after reflection. God creates everything out of nothing, and everything which God is to use, He first reduces to nothing. For without risk there is no faith, and the greater the risk, the greater the faith. The minority is always stronger than the majority, because the minority is generally formed by those who really have an opinion. At the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference. Only one deception is possible in the infinite sense: self-deception. The question is not to be or not to be. It is what we should be until we are not. The God that can be named is not God. Only when it is a duty to love, only then is love eternally and happily secured against despair. I go fishing for 1,000 monsters in the depths of my own self. It is very important in life to know when your cue comes. The deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than himself. The thinker without a paradox is like a lover without a feeling, a paltry mediocrity. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. For he who loves God without faith reflects on himself, while the person who loves God in faith reflects on God. The person who praises God is on the tracks of justice. I would rather be a swineherd understood by the swine than a poet misunderstood by men. The best news the world has ever heard came from a graveyard. Christ is risen. There can be no faith without risk. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. The task must be made difficult, for only the difficult inspires the noble-hearted. The unhappy person is never present to themselves, because they always live in the past or the future. We always grow more through defeats than victories. To venture causes anxiety. Not to venture is to lose oneself. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Don't forget to love yourself. Take a chance and you may lose. Take not a chance and you have lost already. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. The more a person limits himself, the more resourceful he becomes. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. Wherever there is a crowd, there is untruth. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. The door to happiness opens outward. Purity of heart is to will one thing. To be a teacher in the right sense is to be a learner. I am not a teacher, only a fellow student. Therefore do not deceive yourself. Of all deceivers, fear most yourself. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. Love is all. It gives all, and it takes all. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. Life has its own hidden forces, which you can only discover by living. You become what you understand. Now, with God's help, I shall become myself. On the secretly blushing cheek is reflected the glow of the heart. What looks like politics, and imagines itself to be political, will one day unmask itself as a religious movement. Love is the expression of the one who loves, not of the one who is loved. The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. If you think you understand, it isn't God. The Bible is God's love letter to us. What if everything in the world were misunderstanding? What if laughter were really tears? Whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate. Hope is passion for what is possible. It is not the path which is the difficulty. Rather, it is the difficulty which is the path. Love believes all things, and yet is never deceived. It belongs to the imperfection of everything human that man can only attain his desire by passing through its opposite. The highest of all is not to understand the highest, but to act upon it. If anyone on the verge of action should judge himself according to the outcome, he would never begin. Many of us pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that we hurry past it. It is so hard to believe because it is so hard to obey. Happiness is the greatest hiding place for despair. Love does not alter the beloved. It alters itself. Take away paradox from the thinker, and you have a professor. Every mental act is composed of doubt and belief. But it is belief that is the positive. It is belief that sustains thought and holds the world together. It is more blessed to give than to receive. But then it is also more blessed to be able to do without than to have to have. Death cannot explain itself. The earnestness consists precisely in this, that the observer must explain it to himself. If I could prescribe only one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, I would prescribe silence. I begin with the principle that all men are bores. Surely no one will prove himself so great a bore as to contradict me in this. Adversity not only draws people together, but brings forth that beautiful inward friendship